the head was uncovered, or covered only with its native thatching of long bushy tangled black hair. This might be out of compliment to the ladies, of whom there were several, and who ought in politeness to have been mentioned first. Nothing could be simpler than their costume, consisting of a very dirty and extremely torn chemise, with short sleeves, a shorter petticoat, and a pair of shoes, generally of dirty satin, also a reboso, and the long hair hanging down as Eve's golden locks may have done in paradise. "They call this place a paradise, a Spanish soldier wrote his father, and so I think it is. It is so full of Adams." There was neither fighting, nor swearing, nor high words. I doubt whether there be as much decorum at Crockford's; indeed, they were scrupulously polite to each other. At one table the banker was an enormously fat gentleman, one half of whose head was bound up with a dirty white handkerchief, over which a torn piece of hat was stuck very much to one side. He had a most roguish eye, and a smile of inviting benignity on his dirty countenance. In one hand he held and tingled a guitar, while he most ingeniously swept in the copper with the other. By his side sat two wretched looking women, with long matted hair, their elbows on the table, and their great eyes fixed upon the game with an expression of the most intense anxiety. At another, the banker was a pretty little Indian woman, rather clean, comparatively speaking, and who appeared to be doing business smartly. A man stood near her, leaning against one of the poles that supported the awning, who attracted all our attention. He was enveloped in a torn blanket, his head uncovered, and his feet bare, and was glaring upon the table with his great dark, haggard looking eyes, his brown face livid, and his expression bordering on despair. It needed no one to tell us that on the table was his last stake. What will such a man do but go upon the road? I have heard it mentioned as a strong circumstance in favour of the Mexican character, that there is neither noise nor disturbance in these reunions, none of that uproar and violence that there would be in an English mob, for example. The fact is certain, but the inference is doubtful. These people are degraded and accustomed to endure. They are gentle and cunning, and their passions are not easily roused, at least to open display, but once awakened, it is neither to uproar that these passions will be excited, nor by fair fight that they will be assuaged. In England a boxing match decides a dispute amongst the lower orders. In Mexico a knife and a broken head is easier mended than a cut throat. Despair must find vent in some way, and secret murder or midnight robbery are the fatal consequences of this very calmness of countenance, which is but a mask of nature's own giving to her Indian offspring. Another reason for this tranquillity is the habit of gambling, in which they have indulged from childhood, and which has taught them that neither high words nor violence will restore a single dollar once fairly lost. And in point of fairness everything is carried on with the strictest honour, as among gamblers of high degree. While high life below stairs is thus enacting, and these people are courting fortune in the fresh air, the gentle manly gamblers are seated before the green cloth covered tables, with the gravity befitting so many cabinet councils, but without their mystery, for doors and windows are thrown open, and both ladies and gentlemen may pass in and out, and look on at the game, if they please. The heaps of ounces look temptingly, and make it appear a true El Dorado, nor is there any lack of creature comforts to refresh the flagging spirits. There are supper spread tables, covered with savoury meats to appease their hunger, and with generous wines to gladden their hearts, and the gentlemen who surrounded that board seem to be playing, instead of monte, an excellent knife and fork. You must not suppose that those who hold gambling tables are the less considered on that account. On the contrary, as the banks generally win, they are amongst the richest, and consequently the most respected men in Mexico. These bankers are frequently Spaniards, who have found gambling the readiest stepping stone to fortune. Señor explained to me one plan of those who hold the banks, a sort of hedging by which it is next to impossible that they can lose. For example, one of these gentlemen proposes to his friends to take a share in a vaca, each contributing a few ounces. Having collected several hundred ounces, they go to play at his bank. If they win, he receives his share, of course, and if they lose, his bank wins the whole. It is proceeding upon the principle of heads I win, tails you lose. At the tables few words are spoken. The heaps of gold change masters, but the masters do not change countenance. I saw but one person who looked a little out of humour, and he was a foreigner. The rich man adds to his store, and the poor man becomes a beggar. He is ruined, but makes no sign. The ladies who have collected ounces and made purses send their friends and admirers to the tables to try their luck for them, and in some of the inferior houses the Señoras of a lower class occasionally try their fortune for themselves. I saw one of these who had probably lost, by no means taking it coolly. She looked like an overcharged thunder cloud, but whether she broke forth in anger or in tears, thunder or rain, we did not stay to see. In short, it is an all-pervading mania, and as man is a bundle of habits, the most moral persons in this country, always excepting one or two ladies who express their opinion strongly against it, see nothing in it to condemn, and are surprised at the effect it produces on a stranger; and indeed, after a few years' residence here, a foreigner almost becomes reconciled to these abuses by the veil of decorum with which they are covered. We returned to San Antonio by the brightest possible moonlight, and in perfect safety, it being on the high road to Mexico, and therefore guarded by soldiers. We heard the next morning that a nephew of General B s, who had ventured upon going by a cross road to his house at Mizcuaque, has been attacked and robbed of his winnings, besides being severely wounded. These being the natural consequences, the moral to the story can excite no surprise. The robbers who, in hopes of plunder, flocked down at the time of the fête, like sopilotes seeking carrion, hide themselves among the barren rocks of the Pedregal, and render all crossroads insecure, except with a very strong escort. An anecdote was related to us this morning by a member of the cabinet, a striking one amongst the innumerable instances of fortune's caprices. A very rich Spaniard, proprietor of several haciendas, attended the fête at San Agustin, and having won 3,000 ounces, ordered the money to be carried in sacks to his carriage, and prepared to return to Mexico along with his wife. His carriage was just setting off when a friend of his came out of an adjoining house, and requested him to stay to breakfast, to which he agreed. After breakfast, there being a monte table in the house, at which some of his acquaintances were playing, he put down 2 ounces and lost. He continued playing and losing until he had lost his 3,000 ounces, which were sent for and transferred to the winners. He still continued playing with a terrible infatuation till he had lost his whole fortune. He went on blindly, staking one hacienda after another, and property of all sorts, until the sun, which had risen upon him a rich and prosperous man, set, leaving him a beggar. It is said that he bore this extraordinary and sudden reverse with the utmost equanimity. He left a son, whom we have seen at San Agustin, where he earns his livelihood as croupier at the gambling tables. 29th. No particular occurrence has taken place since the fête. A visit from the new secretary of the legation and the attaché, a diplomatic dinner at the Minister's, much going and coming and writing on the subject of a house in Mexico, a correspondence concerning the sale of our furniture, mules, etc., etc., a good deal of interest excited by a bet between 2 English gentlemen as to whether it were possible for one of them to ride from Mexico to San Angel in 20 minutes, which feat he performed, starting from the gate called El Niño Perdido, and reaching the old church of San Angel within the given time. These, I think, are the most remarkable circumstances that have taken place. We are now in treaty for the furnished apartments of the director of the Casa de Moneda, the Mint, a great building next the palace, from which upwards of 1,300 millions of coined gold and silver have issued since the beginning of the 16th century. The house is a palace in extent and solidity, and the residences of the director is very spacious and handsome, besides having the great advantage of being furnished. We expect to return to Mexico in a few days. Casa de Moneda, 6th July. Here we are, re established in Mexico for a short time at least, and not without difficulty has it been accomplished. We left the